Hi, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from Meeple University on the Dice Tower.
Today we'll be teaching you how to play Starframe, game designed by Dan Guillet, Jason Atencio, Jay and Joseph Klerpel and Ashley Guild, and published by Exodus Games. We are here using a prototype copy of the game, and so the rules and components may not be final.
Let's get to the table.
A black hole has opened up near Starframe Station, and all of the players are in danger. All of a sudden, the mysterious Sechem arrives, offering potential salvation to one player in the game, at the cost of hypermatter. Now, players must salvage their own personal Starframes and enlist the help of droids to head out into space and try to gather as much hypermatter as they can to win Sekhem's favour. The player who collects and banks the most hypermatter by salvaging planets, fighting off invaders, or traversing the abyss will win the game. But be warned, until you've banked it, your hypermatter is not safe from your thieving opponents. To set up the game, first separate and shuffle the game's 10 decks of cards: the planets, invaders, and abysses, which are hexagonal, the 5 different types of ships cards, and the droids. The 10th deck, labelled Rival, is only used in the solo mode of the game. Now lay out the starting cards and tiles. First place the black hole in the centre of the table, then place the 5 numbered round markers around it, and place the Starframe round counter on the 5 step. From the planet deck, deal 6 cards face up around the deck, and do likewise for the abysses, but place those cards face down. Do note that the configuration I'm showing here is the most compact way to lay these cards on the table, but it's not strictly necessary. You could lay these out in rows or in whatever pattern you wished. It won't impact gameplay. Now give each player the following components. First, a hero board. Each player chooses whether to use the symmetrical side of the board, which shows no power down the bottom, or the asymmetrical side, which has a lower stats boost but has an asymmetrical power. For your first game, you should use the symmetrical side. Note also that players should not use the Sechem board. That is for the solo mode. Now give each player a location marker, which says space or station, and it should be placed station side up, interlocking with the board. Each player is dealt 1 card from each of the 5 part decks, and these are arranged face up to form your starting Starframe. When doing this, you must line up each of the gold-coloured hard points, but otherwise you have full flexibility to arrange as you wish. You can rearrange parts that are already in your Starframe at any time. Then set your starting stats in boost, armour, and power by counting up the total number of icons on all of your starting Starframe parts, as well as the bonus on the top of your player board. Here, this Starframe has 7 boost, plus 3 from the player board for a total of 10. Likewise, 5 armour and 5 power. Then for easy reference, take a max arrow and have it covering up the next spaces above where you've placed these cubes. Finally, each player draws a hand of 6 droid cards, which are held in hand and not shown to opponents. Choose a first player and you're now ready to play. Starframe is played in turns, starting from the first player and going clockwise around the table. After the last player has taken a turn, the round marker is advanced to the next number down, and after the 5th round of play is complete, the game is over and proceed to final scoring. The aim of the game is to gain hypermatter, which is gained by collecting these hexagonal shaped cards. The hypermatter is shown over here inside the orange icon. Hypermatter bearing cards are gained and placed into the player's cargo hold during the game, and from there must be banked in order to score their points at the end of the game. At the end of the game, it's the player with the most banked hypermatter who will be the winner. A player's turn is broken into 3 phases: the start phase, the action phase in which the player takes 3 actions, and the end phase. The end phase is always the same. It involves replenishing any statistics which have been depleted through the round back to max. However, what happens in the start phase and what actions are available in the actions phase depends on the player's current location, whether they are at the station, or whether they have travelled out into space. This flippable location marker is used to keep track of where the player is currently located. The start phase that the player resolves depends on where that player is located at the start of their turn. The actions available to a player depends on where that player is located at the time of taking an action, and so if the player does travel from space to the station or vice versa during the actions phase, they may be able to take actions from both locations in the same turn. So understanding that, let's first have a look at how a station turn works. The first step is to draw a new droid card, and there is no limit to the number that a player may hold. Then you may bank hypermatter, and if you have any hypermatter bearing cards in your cargo hold, you may take all of them and then place them underneath your player board. These will now score at the end of the game and are protected from being stolen by opponents. There is never a reason not to bank your entire cargo hold when given the opportunity. Next, you'll proceed to the actions phase. You may take 3 actions, and there are 5 different actions that you may take at the station. The first is to draw a part, and you choose one of the 5 part decks, draw the top card from it, and add it to your hand, unseen to opponents. The second option is to modify your Starframe, and here you may make a single modification using the parts in your hand. Your options are that you may add one new part to your Starframe, or you may remove an old part from your Starframe, or you may swap an old part for a new part, or you may insert a new part between 2 existing parts. Remember that already placed parts may be freely rearranged at any time, but it's only with this Modify Starframe action that you may add, remove, or swap parts on the frame. As in setup, you must ensure that these golden hard points line up, and when your action is complete, your Starframe may not contain more than 9 cards. When you make an addition or an adjustment, you should update your stats accordingly. For each added or removed part, increase or decrease both the statistics cube and the max arrow by the same amount. So here you would increase your boost, both max and current, by 1, and likewise your power. The maximum that any statistic may be is 12. The third option is to bank hypermatter, and this works exactly the same way as it did in the start phase, except that it costs you one of your 3 actions. Now this action may seem unnecessary because you can do it during the start phase, but where this helps you is if you travel back to the station during the turn, or otherwise acquire hypermatter during the turn, and wish to bank it before anyone else has the chance to steal it. Speaking of stealing cargo, that is the 4th action option. Here the active player attempts to steal unbanked hypermatter from an opponent's cargo hold. Go through the following steps. First, the active player chooses an opponent and announces the number of times they're going to attempt to steal. Up front, the player must spend 3 power, which is the red statistic, per steal attempt. If the defending player wishes to try to defend the steal, then that player spends 1 armor, which is the blue statistic, per steal attempt. If they don't do this, then the steal goes through unblocked, and usually you'll want to block it. Now you will resolve each of the steal attempts separately. The attacker chooses the card they wish to try to steal, in other words, the highest scoring card. Each player then rolls a 6-sided die. If the defender rolls higher, or the 2 rolls are the same, then the steal attempt fails. If the attacker rolls higher, then the steal is successful, and the stolen card is moved from the defending player's cargo hold into the attacking player's cargo hold. The attacker will still need to bank this hypermatter before it is safe from other players. You'll then proceed to the next steal attempt, and so on until all steal attempts are complete. Do note that if a steal attempt on a high scoring card was unsuccessful the first time around, future steal attempts can still be used on that same card. Once all of the steal attempts have been completed, the action is over. The last option is to travel to space, and there are 2 ways to do this. Either you may spend 5 boosts in order to travel to space and not immediately end your turn, or you may travel without spending boost and end your turn right away. Either way, you flip over to the space side of this tile. Then you'll proceed to the end phase, and do note that travelling without spending boost ends your turn by taking you to your end phase. You do not skip the end phase. In this phase, you will reset all 3 of your statistics back to their maximum. While you're in space, the start phase of your turn starts in much the same way as it would at the station. You draw 1 droid card. Then you must defend the station, and aside from being compulsory, this is one of the ways to gain hypermatter in the game. First, roll a die, and then draw that many invader cards from the top of the invader deck, and reveal them all face up. Each invader card has a relatively low statistics cost, but also has a relatively low amount of hypermatter. To defeat this invasion and earn any of this hypermatter, you must defeat all of the invaders that you've drawn. However, you face them one by one in whichever order you wish, and have an opportunity to play helpful droid cards between each invader. To face an invader, simply deduct from your stats any of the statistics shown on the top of that card. So here it would be 2 power, 2 armor, and 1 boost. Continue along the line in whichever order. So here it would simply cost 3 power, here it would cost 3 armor, and here it would cost another 3 armor plus 1 power. Assuming this player was unable to play a droid card which helped, the player has failed because they've run out of armor. The player still loses this last power because it is able to be lost, and then goes through the failure process for an invasion. All of the failed cards are placed onto the bottom of the invader deck, and then the player rolls the damage die. On the roll of a hex, the player loses their most recently gained hex from their cargo hold, which goes back onto the bottom of its corresponding deck. And on the roll of a part, the player must lose a ship part of that type from their Starframe. If you're successful, then add the cards into your cargo hold. After your mandatory defense of the station, you go into your actions phase, where again you have 3 actions, and you have a total of 6 to choose from while in space. The first is to defend the station again, and go through exactly the same process. Roll the dice, and then try to fight off each of the invaders, gaining the hypermatter if you win, or suffering the penalties if you lose. Your second option is to salvage a planet. Choose one of the 6 face-up planet cards which you have enough stats to beat. Here, for example, you could spend 7 boost and 4 armor to salvage this particular planet, taking it into your cargo hold. As with the invaders, this card will have hypermatter, which you'll need to bank in order to score it, but you may have an additional reward in the form of droid cards or part cards. Where one of these rewards exists, you take that reward right away, not when you bank the card. This goes only to the player who salvages the planet, and so if this card were later stolen by an opponent, the opponent would not get that bonus. Then refill the empty space. The third option is to traverse an abyss, and this works much the same way as the planets, except you can't see the abyss before you attempt it. Take one of the 6 face-down abysses, flip it face up, and then determine whether you have enough statistics to defeat it or not. If you do, lose those statistics, add the card to your cargo hold as normal, with the hypermatter to be banked later, and the droids or parts gained right now. Due to the uncertainty of the situation, abysses are worth more points than planets. If, however, you had insufficient stats to defeat it, then the failed abyss is placed on the bottom of the abyss deck, and as with the invaders, you'll lose all the statistics you can, and then roll the damage die. Then refill the abyss options. The last action, which is unique to space, is to recharge one of your 3 stats up to its current max. Then there are 2 other actions available in space, which are also available on the station, and we've already gone through those. One is stealing cargo, and the other is travelling, which may be done by boost or by ending your turn. Finally, you'll resolve the end phase, which once again recharges all of your stats to max, regardless of your location. Through the game, you'll also be able to use the droid cards that you draw in order to help you, and you may play a droid card as a free action at any time on your turn. Some droid cards can also be played out of turn. Many of these cards effectively serve as an extra action, allowing you to take one of the actions we've already spoken about in addition to the 3 you'll have each turn. These also give you the flexibility to take that action if you're in the wrong location. Escape Capsule, for example, is a way to bang hypermatter while you're in space. There are also free action droids which simply give you an extra action. But this action must be from your current location. Some introduce additional actions not available as part of the base, for example stealing parts from an opponent, running away from one of a group of invaders, or taking a peek at abyss cards. And then there's Undo, which allows you to cancel the outcome of one of your own actions if luck wasn't on your side, and Shield, which you can play out of turn to cancel one of your opponent's actions after they've finished stealing one of your parts or cargo. In both of these cases, you'll wait until the entire initiating action is complete before playing the card and undoing the whole action. The game ends immediately after the 5th round of play is complete. Players add up all of the hypermatter that they've banked on hex cards during the game and ignore anything on cards that were still in their cargo holds. The player with the most banked hypermatter wins the game. The game can also be played in a solo mode facing Sechem as your opponent, and it has an easy or hard mode where Sechem has 3 actions per turn or 4. Sechem starts with a 7-part ship and will draw cards from this rival deck in order to determine which actions they will do. Sekhem's actions are resolved in the same way as your actions, but Sechem is not limited by location. And that's how to play Starframe. We hope you enjoyed this video.
When we film this video, Starframe is going to Kickstarter, so we'll put the link in the description below when it is live, so you can check it out. If you find this video useful, please help us by hitting that like button and subscribe to the Dice Tower if you haven't already done so.
And if you have any questions, comments or feedback, please leave them in the comment section below.
See you next time!